This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the podcast. I am your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the amazing J.M. Paquette that's now got her computer audio working properly. And our amazing guest today is Dominic Ashen. Woo! Woo!
Hello. Hello.
Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking first so people can drink along. So I decided, our sponsor today is Skunk Brothers Spirits. If you go on their website, it's veteran-owned. DWA10 is the coupon code. But I'm drinking wine tonight because I was feeling a little fancy. Okay, their whiskey is very fancy too. So, oh my God, I'm just going to get myself in trouble. Okay, I'm drinking Pacific Rim Sweet Riesling, which has a dragon in the background. But I'm drinking it out of a friend of mine who has a company called Designs for the Divine. That's amazing. Made me a Michael Scott tumbler that says, you need to play to win, but you also need to win to play. Which, of course, doesn't make any sense. Jen, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking not even Earl Grey. It's chamomile tea in a Jack Skellington mug.
That is boring as hell. Dominic, what are you drinking?
I've got, so it's peach vodka, orange juice, and pineapple juice. An old favorite and something that masks pretty much all of the taste of the alcohol.
That is super fancy. That's way fancier than mine.
And I'm drinking it out of this blue IKEA cup, so super fancy.
Kicking it up a notch.
I do have I have a different, this is just juice, but this is a plastic cup, so I'm super fancy, and a friend of mine bought me them because, and I quote, "You break shit."
I mean, you can't tell. It looks like glass from here, so.
It does, and I pretend on most of the podcasts. It's not. It's plastic because I break things. Okay, so Dominic, for those out there that may not know, what do you write?
Well, I write gay porn. No.
Okay, I should have been drinking when he said that. I should have known.
I write male romantic erotica, basically. That is where my specialty is. A lot of it tends to be kink oriented as well.
Very, very cool. And how long have you been writing?
I'd say off and on for 6 or 7 years, although I really only got super serious about it 2-3 years ago.
Okay, what made you decide to, okay, so where does the writing genesis come from? What made you sit down and go, I'm gonna write some gay erotica. I'm gonna do that.
Well, okay, so growing up, not a whole lot of gay content out there. Very few things on television, very few things in books, even fewer things on television. But I would try to, I would consume everything I could. I would go to the library constantly, looking up authors I could find on the internet that had written things and trying to find their books. And almost all of them ended just horribly depressing. Someone gets gay bashed, someone's partner gets gay bashed, someone gets HIV, just really depressing stuff. And at a certain point, I wanted to write happier stories so that there were happier stories. And I'm really happy that that's not really an issue anymore. We have just hundreds and hundreds of stories out there that end much more positively for the gay couple in the end. But that was the main reason. And the reason I got into porn is I spent a lot of time reading. I'm sure a lot of teenagers or former teenagers out there are familiar with having to hide porn on the computer from your parents. Written porn is a lot easier to be stealthy with than other kinds of porn. So I would spend a lot of time on nifty.org reading all sorts of things. And I spent a lot of time in their authoritarian section, which is where all of the kinky stuff is, and learned a lot about myself. So that's where the specific path to what I write now came from.
I think that's awesome. And I think that's very true as well, is that yay, that there's more stuff going out there, and yay, that there's avenues for even more stuff to go out there. So it's not, you know, sad stories all the time.
Right.
So did you write when you were younger at all? Like what made you pick writing and not like movies or music?
Why didn't you go into porn yourself? I feel like that was the question.
I was asking why the written word.
Whatever.
I think I don't know. I guess I think I've always been at least a little funny or a little good with words. It just sort of came naturally. I would have loved to be like an artist or something, but I don't have the patience to sit down and develop the talent. Arguably, probably the same for music or movies, but writing just came a little more naturally. I wrote a few, like I would write a few little silly short stories here or there, and then I'd say like 6 or 7 years ago when I started like picking up like my current moniker and posting stuff online, it was like a handful of things I submitted to the Nifty archive myself. But it wasn't until like 2-3 years ago that I was like, okay, I'm going to write a whole book.
And so what is the first thing that you got published?
So Steel and Thunder is the first thing I got published with the wonderful Four Horsemen Publications. But prior to that, I had actually posted 2 whole, quote unquote books online via Nifty and Archive of Our Own.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of fun developing like a little audience with that. And I guess I know I learned a lot of like, I tuned up a lot of my writing skill in writing those books, and I would very much like to rewrite parts of them and have them published in the near future once orcs stop taking up all my time. But like I really value the like posting things online and getting feedback and like developing your craft that way is very useful, and I kind of miss it in some ways.
No, I think the cool thing about stuff like that is it's instant feedback. And as you start to hone your craft and what's working and what's not working, it definitely gives you an avenue where, you've had a different journey than some authors. We're going to get into that, of getting feedback about your work, right? Is sometimes you put a book out there and you're like, hello, is there anybody there? Like, do you like it at all? No? Nobody? Okay, cool. So let's talk about your present series. So Steel and Thunder, do a little, what is Steel and Thunder about for the audience out there?
Oh boy. Okay, so I guess the short answer is it's about a human adventurer who gets captured by an orc, learns that he likes it, and also that he might have some kind of magical destiny. It's half fantasy adventure novel, half kinky gay erotica. And it really it is a pretty even balance of the two, I'd like to think. So the character of David is a character that had been like rolling around in my head for a really long time, and I had used him in sort of like as a stand-in in other stories. And after I finished Pinned, the second finished story I posted online, I was thinking about what I wanted to write next, and I had this idea for a fantasy story in my head for a while, and then I was on Twitter one day, and I just saw some orc porn basically, and like something struck in my head that was like filled in the blanks for the story that I had been missing. And I just suddenly had like, okay, wow, so I think I actually have a whole story going out here. Originally, I only had, I guess, the first 2 books in my head, and then I was going to move on to something else. But as the, people, so I originally posted, I guess, the first half of Steel and Thunder probably online before I ended up getting my publishing contract. As I was getting more and more feedback, as people seemed to be liking more, I started to get more of an idea of like, I guess how could I expand this story? What do I want to like? I knew I wanted to tell, like I knew there would be a sequel, but I didn't know what that sequel would be. Oh, also originally, the first 2 books were intended to be 1 book, but that would be a really, really, really big book.
Be a really long book. That
Yeah.
would be that'd be a tome. Like by
Yeah.
definition, that would be a tome.
Yeah. Online, not a big deal. It's web pages. However, physically, not going to work. Had to split it in 2. But I'd say so about before I finished the first book, I knew I had a vague idea how the story was going to end, and then like halfway through the second one, I knew how the series, like I had the rest of the story for the series basically worked out, and was like I have a lot of spreadsheets. I have a lot of spreadsheets.
Oh my God. So we're gonna go into that. I will say, because obviously he's a publisher, but also I listen to a lot of audiobooks because I do a lot of driving, and then I listen to audiobooks when I'm doing my chores. That's how I get most of my books these days, is just like that. And I have to say, there were so many times I was cracking up while reading the book. And what I loved about the book, and I'm sure others will chime in on this, but is that it is such a great fantasy story, and not like sexual fantasy story, but fantasy story. This whole world is built. And a lot of times when you read erotica, it's like the sex and everything else is kind of, it's there, you kind of mention it, it's like there's a blue door, moving on. Like it, but this had this whole genesis, and it's just that you built an amazing world where these orcs live and stuff like that, and the community. And it's not what most people, including most people like myself that play Dungeons and Dragons, would expect of an orc. Like orcs are, even Lord of the Rings, the orcs are all these like guttural, we will smash things kind of people, and that's not what you have in your book.
Yeah, it was. That is something that I've sort of never quite understood. Like, orcs are always dumb. And like in Dungeons and Dragons, you can't actually even play an orc normally. You can play a half orc because orcs themselves are too brutish and dumb to like. So I just, why why can't we have smarter orcs? And I wanted to sort of turn that on its head. I tried to. I also like I have been trying to incorporate like a lot of different fantasy conventions, from tabletop to J.R.R. Tolkien style stuff, and and including the sex along with that was also just like, why can't I tell a story that is also this? So
and I think that's what's brilliant about it, because it breaks genres. I love it when genres are broken. I love things in genre. There are things that are great that are in genre, but I think for far too long, when you broke a genre, it was like this, like, it's this thing, like, let's just shove it under the couch, like you broke a genre, nobody's going to go there. And it does it so flawlessly, just fluidly does that exact activity. And I think that's what makes it so incredibly popular too. Because another thing about you is you've been in the Amazon top 100s, and Steel and Thunder came out.
Yeah. First, thank you. I'm so glad you feel that way about the book. And yeah, the success of it has been really, really crazy. I think I'm occupying about 4 spots in the top 100 right now between the ebooks and audiobooks, probably. And there has not been a week where I think at least one has not been up there. And I know that is not normal for a brand new author.
It's because your voice is amazing. Can I ask you about that? You wrote in first person present tense. Why? It's wonderful and it works so well, but it's it's a different kind of story.
So I wanted the story to feel as though it is happening when you were reading it. Mm-hmm. And I wanted, like, I talk to myself all the time. I don't know if everybody else does, but I'm constantly in my own head, and being in first person means I get to be in my character's head and they get to talk to you beyond being, a narrator. And like I said, I wanted it's present tense because I wanted to feel like, so this is happening to them at the same time you are reading it. So they are as surprised as you are, or it feels as immediate to them as it does to you. And it leads to some interesting things because I break the fourth wall a few times, and I don't necessarily realize I'm doing it until after the fact. but I'm happy that it still seems to work.
Yeah, it's that Deadpool Ferris Bueller. I'm showing my
Yeah.
age right now, but that, yeah, where you're connecting with your reader every time, because
Yeah.
David is he's an everyman. Like he's a character that readers just connect with, because he's, he makes bad choices, and sometimes he doesn't see clues, and he's not great at catching hints sometimes. Like he's very real. I love it.
No, I think it's true. I think he makes a lot of choices that normal people would make, like the average person. I always think reading high fantasy, Jen, me and her have read high fantasy, of course, probably you have too, like our whole lives. And one thing's always drove me nuts about characters, like I loved Pierce Anthony's Xanth series, talking about showing age right there, Jen. How about that? Okay.
So good.
But his series made fun of all of the tropes of fantasy. Like a lot of that whole series kind of took cracks at the fantasy thing. There's not sex in it the way there is in your book, but I always liked it because I always thought it was ridiculous when characters are not flawed. Like when they always have the perfect thing and they're always doing this thing and they always do the right thing. Like, I'm like, hello, most of us would make sucky choices, then maybe come around to making the right choice and looking good, but they never talk about the bad choice that you made to begin with.
If your character isn't flawed, they have no room to grow over the course of the book, and that's not very interesting. Not to say that, the more screwed up a character is, the more interesting they are, but it does sometimes work out that way. And there's also I get what you mean when you, like, in high fantasy, there's a lot of things just seem to be perfect for some reason for some characters with no explanation. And I want there you go. And I've always, like, I want my characters to, despite the fantastical setting, like, I want them to react realistically and have realistic thoughts and feelings, and things aren't just going to work out because they're supposed to. They're going to have to deal with their weird internal issues.
No, it's true. Okay, so let's talk about your writing process, because obviously it's character driven, a lot of it, from what you're saying. So some people can put their characters in the back seat of the car, like myself, and like, we're going for this ride. Everybody stay in the car. But there are other people, JM, for instance, that her characters are like, give me the keys.
No, I'm like, we're going to do a thing. We're going to go and there's a dragon. And they're like, no, we're going to lunch. Actually, there's going to be a sandwich and then a bar. And I'm like, what is happening?
It's like, I don't even drink. What is going on?
I do like a roadmap before I get started. I usually have the idea for what the basic, like, plot of the book is, and I'll write out what the main story points are. Then I'll also write out, like, since the series is about David and Kazak's relationship, that is one of the main focuses. What is the journey their relationship is going to take over the course of the book? How is it going to change or be affected? And then I also like to write out, are there any interesting character moments I want to include? Are there any funny scenes I've thought of that might be interesting? And I'll try to make a list of all these things and then sort of order it out in ideally a chapter by chapter outline for what I'm going to write the book as. That said, once I actually get into each chapter, I do like to, like, I don't plan out conversations beforehand too much. I like to just sort of write them and then, like, what would this character say to that? What would this character then say to that? And let that flow and then sort of see where that takes me. And that has a couple times sort of led to me needing to change a few things later on in my plot outline. But that's fine. That's what that's for. Like, there's it's not set in stone. It's just sort of to help me stay on the guideposts.
I think that's, a lot of people can't use those at all. Like, they write them, they do them, then they go out the window the moment they start clicking on the keyboard.
I just had to get you in the car by telling you we were going to go somewhere. We're actually going somewhere completely different. But your story has a lot of names in it, like, words that you make up. How do you come up with those? Where do your inspirations come from?
So 50% of those end up just being a placeholder text until I'm ready to send it out to beta readers or editors. Literally, sometimes like in all caps, it will be like placeholder name. And then so later I will go back and a lot of times it will be just pulling stuff from from nowhere. I like to use fantasy language translators online, but put in random words and then take random, I'll take that part of that word, that part of that word, that part, and that's my new word. So I'm not actually copying anything ideally. And then sometimes if I'm basing something on maybe something more specific, I will try to look up what's a maybe more clever word I could use for this, or what's something related to this that I could hint at. But coming up with names is the worst, and I hate it. Especially
That's okay.
names.
You're way better than somebody on this call that's every character would start with a J.
Why I want to know.
Yeah, like she's just looking for secrets, because I played a D&D game where she was running it, and every character, no, I'm sorry, it was a Wheel of Time game. It was very confusing because we'd run into NPCs and everyone's name started with the J. And I'm like, who the hell was Jarek? Like, I don't even remember who that was. And then she went, the name is Kara. I'm like, you're just going down the alphabet now. What are you doing?
I remember so well, always never remembering any of my friends' characters' D&D names and always just referring to them as my friend's name. And it just, I'm not going to remember, man. I'm sorry.
I'm not good with names anyway, like as a human being. So as a writer, I'm even worse at it. I'm lucky I remember my characters' names once I figure out what they are.
In my last book, there was a character whose name I literally could not decide on until I finished writing it and had to do a find and replace before I sent it to my editor. Because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to name you, but I'll figure it out eventually. And it did.
That's okay. I switch characters' names from chapter to chapter. It doesn't matter. It's moot. That's what the editor's for. Just kidding. I'm so kidding about that. It's not what the editor's for at all. That just happens to be my latest Achilles heel. Is like, should his name be Bob or Sam? I don't know. I'm going to put them both in there, and hopefully nobody will notice. It's okay.
And you'll have 53 of one and 55 of the other. And then,
yeah, I know. I'm good at it. Shut up. I'm very well aware of what I'm good at. I don't need your judgment. Thank you, JM. So, one more question before the break. I'm going to let you do it, Jen, because you opened your mouth in which to ask a question. I saw that. It was a question mouth.
I was going to ask more about writing process. Like, when you come up with your ideas, your rough outline, do you use a program for that? Do you just type it? You said you had a lot of spreadsheets.
I love a Google Doc. I use a lot of things in Google Drive. Also Google Keep, which is their little notepad app. I frequently will just pull that up on my phone when I get hey, I need to change something about a chapter. Hey, I have an idea for something in the future. Just jot it down on something real quick. I really recommend writers do that because it is so easy to forget something really cool you thought of. And then Google Docs makes it really easy to send out stuff to my I have a few really trusted beta readers, so I send out every new chapter to them, and it just makes it easy to send it to them and to track changes and stuff for free, since other stuff is typically costing money. I can't emphasize enough, keep notes, people, because you will thank yourself later.
I do a lot of voice memos in my phone. I don't know about you, but Charles Gannon actually turned me on, and I'm starting to play with it, to this thing called Otter AI.
Val used it last week, and she had a long drive and recorded all the ideas for one book on the way there, and then all the ideas for a separate book on the way back, and came home and was like, I have 15,000 words of stuff.
Yeah, no, that he recommended it because he says he sits and he talks to it. And so I haven't messed with it yet, but I was like, I have 8-hour drives sometimes down to Florida. I could write an entire book on my way down to Florida. I'll probably have to edit it, but
it's pretty good. Like, I saw the document for it, and you can tell when she's yelling at cars. It goes.
I was gonna say, I was wondering how many lines are just her cursing at traffic or something.
A few.
Those are
Yeah.
my favorite texts, like voice to text, when someone's forgets they're in the middle of doing a voice to text and like is talking to a car outside.
Like, really? Am I invisible?
Like, why is my mom cursing at me?
For the record, you are invisible. But on that note, I've been in the car with Jen. For whatever reason, her car is invisible. It is a
I
true
put the
thing.
invisibility shield on and I just leave it
Yeah,
on.
I think she hit the button sometime and just doesn't know how to turn it off. But we are going to take a quick break and we will be right back.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Okay, so we're back. Let's talk about sex. So you have a human having sex with an orc, which is, it's different, but I'm curious because you write erotica and I write erotica. Where do you, as far as the sex scenes and stuff like that, I mean, obviously we can say porn and this and that, but how do you go about creating those scenes and not having repetition? And you know, because that's the one thing about sex is there you can only say like throbbing member so many times.
There's only so many
like,
times you can
nobody
do,
wants
yeah.
to hear about the throbbing member. Move on. Like,
so this might be revealing a little too much, but I have experienced every sexual act depicted in my book from one side of things or the other myself. I'm a fairly active member of the kink community, and I'm also just kind of a whore.
awesome. Star.
When I'm actually so everything I write about is like I can speak to how it happens, I feel like, which is a little it's different because I do feel like a lot of erotica sex scenes seem like they've been written from porn, which is fine, but you know it's different when I guess you've been there. But so when I write them, I like to I sort of outline them in I will write like sort of rapid fire single lines, like then this should happen, then you know then they should move to this position, then this person should do this, so that then I can later go back and expand on each of those lines, like in a full like paragraph, like how can I describe this in like the most erotic way possible that is unique, and then how does that lead to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But I like that is one of the instances in which I do actually like to have I guess a script almost, just to block the physical scene in my head, because there is, you know, so much movement involved.
No, it makes sense. I feel like if somebody has experienced it, you have the sensations described seem more realistic than when somebody's writing about something that's happening. And not that you can't be a good writer and you can't have a good imagination. And
Of course,
you know, there's I'm sure some, you know, moms in Nebraska that are writing gay porn that do an okay job.
I have read some wonderful gay porn written by women.
Yeah, but I think there is a difference when you're more in touch with the material, I should say. Is that a nice way to say it? Than when you're writing it and you're like, you know, sitting in the bleachers and you know you never had a rim job, for instance. Like, it's very hard to know exactly what that's like for.
I have also definitely read things that it's like, so you have no idea how the human body actually works. Also, there is an aspect of we all saw Brokeback Mountain, right?
Oh yeah.
When I saw the sex scene in that, all I could think of is, oh my god, that is so dry, that must hurt. There are just some inaccuracies for the way people jump right into things that I know it's a fantasy and I know we're like go with the flow, like get into it, but as a gay man who has had sex and has had, you know, the typical issues gay people can run into, it's just like, oh no, we there's a cleanup issue, we got to stop, or ow, that's not going to work today. I can't get those out of my head. So when those happen in the scene in the background, I'm like, well, damn, that's not how that works.
No, that's true. Trust me.
I
It's
wish that's
true.
how it works.
I don't think it's just gay porn that's like, I've read erotica where I'm like, have you actually ever had sex before that you wrote this book? Like ever? Because
You
there's
get
too many
Belinda
body
Blink.
parts. Like
I wish I could like there was like something online where someone had screen capped some straight guy's erotica where he like had written this just awful sex scene about like getting a blowjob that made no sense, and it was like, have you ever had a blowjob, sir? Do you know how the body works?
Well,
I'll
that's
tell you this.
so my dad wrote a porno, right?
My dad wrote a
Yes.
porno. I was
There's a
gonna
whole
say my
podcast
dad
on
wrote
it.
a porno is a perfect example because it's his dad. He's
Belinda
obviously
Blink.
had sex at some point. Right?
I don't know.
I'll tell you though, when he described the woman's breasts as hanging pomegranates, I was like, oh, I'm done.
It's his just complete lack of understanding of anatomy that.
But at the same time, like, dude's living his life, go for it, and like,
you know,
he's more successful than I am.
Well, he's more successful because his son started reading it on the internet, not for any other reason. You know, I often say though, it's really funny to me because my dad talks. So I'm going to ask you this because my dad will introduce me to his friends and be like, "My daughter, she writes my home on her island." Like this is a segue into a conversation, and I'm like, I also write horror stuff, Dad. I'm like giving you my other books. Nope, we're gonna go with this one. Okay, this is one we're going with.
I mean, personally, that is still one of my favorite novel titles ever. Like, instantly caught my eye the first time I saw it. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I've had a little too much vodka.
How do you deal with family reading your work?
Yeah, let's talk about family.
No one has yet introduced me as he writes porn. My mom and my sister have bought copies of all my books that I have asked them to keep in a box in their closet and never open. I have basically instructed my family that if they do read it, please do not tell me because they're gonna know stuff about me, and I would rather not know that they know that stuff about me.
Well, take it from somebody who's experienced this and had my very wonderful, sweet, conservative stepmom go, yeah, I read it, and it's really awkward to imagine that was you. I know it was.
And I know that's exactly what everyone in my family would do. It's like, oh, so this is what you're, and like, so I'm not David. If anything, I'm really both of the character, like both David and Kazakh, but I know everyone is instantly going to think I'm David because he's the human. And I just I don't need to look my aunt in the eye and know that she thinks that.
Yeah. Wait till it's your dad's friends out at dinner and that's the conversation. And they're like, oh, you did? And I'm like, whew, this is
so
shocking.
Did you check if your sales went up that night?
Yeah, no, totally. I'm like, log in.
Are any of the other characters based on people in your life though?
No one directly. I've probably cribbed a few maybe mannerisms or quirks here and there, but as of yet, there is no one who is directly based on anyone else. Also, on the family thing, I do have one story. After my mom bought my first book, she had left it out on the counter so that I could sign it when I was coming over the following week. And my stepdad, not thinking, just like strolled over one day, sort of flipped it open, and the first word his eyes fall on is cock. So then he immediately closes it and just walks away and decides to, of course, tell me about it later. It's like, oh yeah, you're not ever gonna want to read this, stepdad. No, not for you.
What about, let's talk for a minute about fans, because your fans love the shit out of this book, as evidence in this series by its rankings. Like, so let's talk about when you started getting fan interaction after it was published.
So I guess so after it was published, I had already had a little bit of a fan, or I had already had a little bit of an audience, I guess, via Archive of Our Own, and so I was think like my Twitter grew. I mean, I don't have a huge Twitter or anything, but I think like I got a decent number. Like it started growing pretty fast, and it's been fun reaching out and connecting with them. I've gotten some like really great pieces of fan art from a couple of people. I need to be more active, honestly. I'm not that great at Twitter. I'm trying to get better, but I really love hearing from people and hearing the way the story has like affected them or touched them, and like I love hearing ideas. It's great.
So you got fan art. Not a lot of authors, even well-known authors, can say people have sent me fan art of my characters. That's pretty badass.
It's trippy, and it's also like it's adorable, and I've posted a few of them on, I believe, my Instagram or my Twitter if anyone wants to go look. Um, it's it's so fun to see how other people interpret your characters.
No, absolutely. What about people, it's fun and everything, but has anybody talked to you about the impact it's had on them seeing a positive representation?
Um, Not exactly. Mostly it's that orc is really hot. When are you writing the next book? I have connected with like I have met a few fans. Like I have one fan that I actually talk to almost daily now. His name is David. Hi David, if you're listening.
I'm sure
been a
he will,
really
because he'll see that you're on air.
he's been a really great motivator, and it's fun to bounce ideas off people like him. I I really love that my story is able to touch people at all, honestly. I never expected this silly little, you know, porny story to matter much to anybody.
No, and it does. Jen, did you have a question?
Not right now, no.
No, is it?
I just keep thinking about how funny it is. Like, how do you, all right, David's great with the one-liners and his little observations. Do those like come and you put them in, or do you just like do those on the spot while you're working through it?
They're very much on the spot. Part of sort of writing in the first person is I really do try to, like, I start thinking as if I was that character as I am writing, so that it is almost as if they are writing what I'm saying. And it really just, I'm the snarkiest person in the world in my personal life, so it just comes up pretty easily.
Like the first time I read that first chapter, I was on a video call and I started laughing so much that I was reading parts of it out loud to them. Like we were all dying. It's one of the funniest first chapters in a book that I've ever read.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
So let's talk about writing in general. So when you're actually sitting down to write, what is your writing environment? What is that like? Describe it.
Not that fancy. I write primarily on a laptop. I like to sit it on the bar outside our kitchen, or this tall table outside, and I do most of my writing standing up. I'm a big pacer when I'm thinking through things, so I will, like, as I'm writing, and then, what am I going to say next? I'll start like walking around my apartment or walking around the patio, thinking through the next lines I want to write down, and then once I've got them down, I'll walk back over to the computer, type them up, then sort of repeat ad nauseum. So I know the podcast is drinking with authors, but I'm actually more of a pot smoker generally. Especially like, so I've never really successfully written while drunk. I've gotten like half a page in and then gotten distracted or tired. But marijuana has helped me through a lot of like writer's block issues, I will say. When I can't figure out where I want to go in a story, I will get stoned and then just spend 15-20 minutes walking around thinking through the story problems and what I might be able to do with them, usually with my phone in hand with Google Keep open so I can take any notes. And I'm working on book 4 now. It's working so far.
No, very true. Go ahead.
Did COVID affect you at all in terms of your writing?
Not really. My day job is one that allows me to work from home, and I was doing that before the pandemic hit, actually. So my day-to-day schedule, thankfully, was not really affected all that much. Also, I have a roommate, but they are very quiet, so I pretty much have an ideal writing environment all the time.
Do you listen to music? I know you say you pace, but do you have music playing when it's?
I do usually like to have music playing to mostly as background noise, because if I have anything, like if I have a show or a podcast or something, it can be too distracting because I'll try to focus on whatever they're saying too much. But music allows me to sort of wander.
Is there a particular kind of music? That was Jen's question. She was going to ask you what your playlist is like. Jen likes to go on YouTube and play like epic soundtrack from fantasy movies.
If I have a fight scene, you know, if there's like a, you know, reunion, then I have like sappy love music play. I like the music to like reflect what I'm trying to have happen.
So if I am thinking through the plot points of a particular scene and I like a fight scene, I will listen to like I don't have a playlist, but I will start pulling up songs I know that get me in that pumped up fight mood. But in general, I have like playlist is all over the place. EDM, pop, rock, hip hop, a little bit of country. Love Dolly Parton. And it's just it bounces from one to the other. I listen to just about everything. I know everyone says that, but I really do.
Yeah, I can't listen to stuff. Well, no, I listen to Celtic music, believe it or not, like fairy music. I listen to it just
hey, if it puts you in the right headspace, go for it.
It's soothing, but I have started listening to a couple really dark playlists for my horror books, like really creepy shit. And then I'm in my house and there's a point sometimes I creep myself out and I have to get up and fucking walk away because I'm like, this is creepy as crap. I can't do this. But what about writing in bars, or can you write in public places?
Not really. I have before when it was a necessity, like I had to get something done and the only place I could do it was in a Starbucks. But I do sort of prefer being in my space. If I've had like a guest staying with me for a few days, I'm not going to get any writing done because I'm going to be too self-conscious about them being there. I do generally like to be with me.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so, go ahead.
I was gonna say, are you a morning writer or an evening writer, or does it just whenever it hits you?
Evening writer, because I usually need my Adderall to kick in first. Hardcore ADHD. Not a lot gets done in the mornings unless I really sit down and force myself to. So, but once I get going in the afternoons and evenings, that's when everything starts coming out.
Oh, that's very cool. So let's talk. You're writing book 4, but you have other series coming out, correct?
I do. I am working on a few other ideas for series at the moment. I'm hoping to start the first novel in a series featuring werewolves after I finish book 4. Don't have a name for you yet, but I'm working on it.
Like same medieval time period, like fantasy?
Same setting, same world, same time period. I don't know that you'll necessarily be seeing any of the characters from Steel and Thunder appearing, but the setting will at least not be entirely unfamiliar.
Shifter erotica, just saying.
It's very popular. I've read a few good things myself. I would like to point out Bo Lake's Wolves of Wharton series. That is, especially the first one in that, I had a very good time reading. She also mixes genres very well: romance, erotica, and horror.
Yes.
Yeah,
Which is no easy feat, delicately, to do such things, you know? Not at all. Okay. So we're gonna wrap up this podcast, but what advice would you give writers out there?
Don't be hard on yourself. Just a first draft isn't supposed to be good. Just get it out of you and onto the page, and then you can fix it later. You can always fix it later. You can publish a book and then fix it later. I have learned. So don't worry about it.
Very cool. And then, so the series is Steel and Thunder.
Yes.
The third one coming out is?
Secrets and Spires, and that will be out May 30th, 2022.
Very, very cool. And how do people find you if they'd like to, hit you up on the social medias and stuff? You have a website, correct?
I do. My website is dominicashen.com, and you can find me at Dom N Ashen on Twitter and dom.n.ashen on Facebook and Instagram.
And you have a Patreon too, where people get sort of super secret stuff, right? You got to do this
I
shameless
do.
self-promotion of that.
You on Patreon, I write once a month. You can get a world building article that expands on Terra, the world Steel and Thunder is set in. I also write a chapter of a short story set in the Steel and Thunder universe, and then there you get a second erotic story every month if you subscribe to that tier. My Patreon is patreon.com/DominicAshen.
Very, very cool. Everybody should check it out, guys. If you're listening to this podcast, regardless if you think this is something I'd like, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to like it, because regardless of what kind of fan you are, it is just a phenomenal story. It is
David,
absolutely.
He's gonna suck you in.
You guys are too kind.
Okay, that is not appropriate. Like, that was the wording you decided to use.
I mean,
Exactly.
if you've read my book, it is very appropriate.
Very, very true. Okay, guys, this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host has been J.M. Paquette. Our amazing guest has been Dominic Ashen. Our sponsor has been Skunk Brothers Spirits, DWA10. I said that correctly this time, so they can't get mad. They don't get mad at me. It's fine anyway. But we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.